and welcome to the Tao of Our Understanding Recovery Podcast. In this podcast, we discuss mystical works of literature and how they relate to recovery. We hope you enjoy today's podcast episode.
Hello, everyone. Buddy C. Welcome to the Tao of Our Understanding Recovery Podcast. I'd like to welcome Marla and Amy and Mark and Craig and Matt and Dennis. Good to have everyone today. Remember, next week we will have Sensei. We'll need Craig. What's our chapter 8? Are we on verse 8? Is that right?
Verse 8. Yep, verse 8.
Okay, we'll need questions for Sensei. He likes that, so we'll need to get those together the next couple of days and get to him. So if you got anything, post it in the Facebook group, and we'll compile together. See what he brings from a Zen perspective for us next week. Today, we've got a different conversation. I had a sponsee, and I'd like to thank Justin M. for texting me about this story. There's a podcast he was listening to. It's called the Alan Watts Experience. And he was listening to Alan Watts talk about basically what it ended up being was, I titled it The Unblocked Mind. About intuitive knowing. And it was so good that I transcribed it, and we're going to use it for context today. So if you got, does anyone need a copy? If you do, I'll put it in the chat. You have it? Everyone have it? Okay, good. What I thought we would do, I do want to mention our 9 p.m. meeting. 9 p.m. Eastern every night is a very good, or at least we're told it's good, AA meeting. We have, if you're coming, I'd suggest being there early because we are topping out at least 4 to 5 nights a week now at 100. The other night we stayed at 100 until 20 till 10. Like for 40 minutes, we stayed at 100 people. Someone would drop out, someone else would come in, someone would drop out, someone would come in. So I'd get there a little early if I wanted to get a seat, unless I just wanted to sit and wait. Just good stuff, guys. Good stuff. It's ZoomAAmeetings.com is a direct link. I'll have that in the chat for you, or in the episode notes. What I thought we would do on this, because it's pretty long, why don't we just start reading it? I'll read just a little segment, and then we'll talk about that segment. Before we do that, though, any overall comments before we start reading the text? I know we had some talk in the Facebook chat about it. Any thoughts on this, guys, before we start reading?
No, well, just a thought about it. I'm looking forward to try that deck of card things with the high-low number, just to see if how we handle that.
Yeah, basically, I think, Dennis, this is talking about 3 different ways of looking at, from what I can see, 3 different ways of looking at decision making. We have the classic. We look at the pros and the cons, and we think it through. We search and we research and we ask for advice and we do all these things. Should I or should I not? And we make a decision based on the facts as we see them, right? Then we have the intuitive thought that comes that surprises us because a lot of times I don't even know it's intuitive. It's just a thought that came like other thoughts come, right? I can give you an example of that from this week. And if you guys have any examples of these intuitive things happening, kind of jot them down or have them, and we'll talk about them and how they arrived and what's different about them. Now, if we talk about this for 2 or 3 weeks, I don't care. It doesn't matter. I'm in no rush. I have no agenda. I think this is the essence of one of the things that we study Taoism about, is this intuitive knowing that's part of this. I had a sponsee this week that messaged me, or we were talking for the week, and you won't believe what happened. I said, what? He said, well, he chairs the Friday night meeting, Derek M. He said, I was just thinking about the meeting, and a thought came to me that I should maybe use a serenity prayer this week for a topic. I said, okay. He said, you're not going to believe what happened. He said, as I'm thinking about it, my co-host texts me, and he doesn't normally do this. He texts me, and he asked if it was his anniversary week, if we could talk about the Serenity Prayer Friday night. And he never does that. There's no reason. There's no, we're not all reading some material that's talking about the Serenity Prayer. There's none of those things. And I was like, that's that intuitive thought, right? And then we have, and one thing that Alan Watts talks about in this, then we have past that is when we just know the right thing to do. We've skipped the thought altogether, and we just know. I remember one time I experienced this, and I was young. I mean, I was in my 20s, and I was going on vacation with a friend. I was married to number one, no kids yet. And we walked into the condo, and my friend's father had the condo. And I'd never met any of his father and his people. And he said, we're looking for the remote control. And for some reason, I walked over to the couch, stuck my hand down in the cushions, didn't even have to look around, touched the remote control, pulled it out and said, here it is. I have no idea how I knew that it was in that exact spot. And it was something so unimportant. Why couldn't that be with the important thing, the things I think are important, right? I mean, I know we've all had experiences like that, I'm sure, where something, that's just the one that comes to mind. I'm sure I've had others of those where I just knew something, and they all freaked out and said, how'd you know that? I don't know. I think my response was, well, it's always in the cushions. And I just went on to something else.
Which is really what I would think too. But as a yogic person, to me, the breath is completely intuitive. It just, it knows to breathe. I know it has nothing to do with what we're thinking, but it's like the body, your breath is intuitive. It knows it has to breathe. It knows it has to be in your body.
Thanks, Marla. There's just so much to this that we have not a clue about. So much. Any other comments before we begin? But that's basically the three different things I see in this, and especially the last one. And part of Zen study, and he talks about Zen, is with koans and koans. And a koan is learning how to just go with that gut, that bypassing the. I'm pointing at my head, bypassing this head, bypassing all the thinking. And so much in recovery is that stop thinking, and then of course, Craig's mantra, stop thinking and end your problems,
It's so true though.
It is. So this is about moving toward that intuitive knowing,
So intuitive, you also have to trust yourself, right?
Yeah.
I usually find that more with intuitive thoughts, I just don't resist anything. I just don't interfere in anything at all. So it's just a case of that's what's popped into my head, and it's sometimes it's more of like gut feeling rather than that head feeling. You just know that something's intuitively right. The more that I try to think about it, the more I'm going to screw it up.
It has something to do too, Craig, I think, with in letting go. Hawkins' book, Pathway to Surrender. I don't have in the desire chapter. He talks about the reason that we don't have what we're desiring is because we desire it. Because when we desire it, we're saying we don't have it already.
Correct.
So we get in our way. And that's part of this too. Because the reason I want to understand intuitive knowledge is a little bit selfish, because I would love to be able to do that in everything. It's so easy. So I want to control it. So I want to take something that's beyond my control. And the reason it works is because I'm not controlling it, right?
I was just going to say, isn't that the idea of it being more intuitive? Because it's kind of like, don't tell buddy, but this is what I'm going to do.
Yeah, it's paradoxical.
Yeah. So I have a real life example. Just last week, I was just sitting here thinking, I'm like, I know a lot of good things happened last week, and I know they were not orchestrated by me. My sister and I have been trying to plan a vacation to Iceland. We were supposed to go last September. We couldn't. And I read an article one night this week that said Iceland was opening its borders to vaccinated travelers. I got so excited. I was like, she's already vaccinated. I've got to schedule my first vaccine. Now I qualify. It was like the same day. Like all of a sudden I qualified. And then so I was able to miraculously, even though other people had not been successful in getting an appointment, got one for Friday. Okay, well, I thought I'm going to ask also when I get there if there's any way they can vaccinate my daughter who turned 16 the day before. Then she was qualified because she has asthma anyway. So I get to the pharmacy, I'm filling out the paperwork, and I say, can I get her vaccinated too? And she said, not without an appointment. I said, okay. Normally, I would have been really upset, would have, raised, just don't you understand? She needs to be vaccinated, blah, blah, blah. I just said, okay, no big deal. Well, the intuitiveness or awareness that I now have because of all of this spiritual stuff that I'm working on, I'm sitting there filling out the paperwork and I overheard somebody say, well, the 5:15 appointment canceled. I was like, it's 5:00. Oh my gosh. So I finished my paperwork and went back up there and I said, oh, I just overheard that your 5:15 canceled. Is there any way that you can let my daughter now have that appointment? So they discussed it with the pharmacist and whatever. Well, then when the pharmacist called me up to discuss that, he looked and he said, so what does that mean? We'll have one dose left? I said, how about I call my husband? He's right down the street. So we ended up, because I was just aware and didn't pitch a fit and act a fool, all of a sudden the three of us got our first dose Friday. There you go. There's a real life example, buddy.
Going with the flow.
Yep.
Now listen to this one. I was meeting with a sponsee last week, and what I do with sponsees is we read things. We'll read a book, and I've got one that I have not been meeting with because of the have met with in over a year, just because of everything going on, and he's been very busy, and he should have been more proactive to meet with me, Jack B, but he wasn't, and he's doing good. He's a great guy. Derek knows. But I finally met with him this week, and we're going to start reading something. And I thought, well, what should we read? And the only book that came to mind, now he's very strict, Catholic, all of that kind of stuff, right? Works for a nonprofit, all that. The book that came to mind was Russell Brand's book on recovery, right? The total opposite of him. And I said, how about the Russell Brand book? He said, you're not going to believe it, but that's the exact book I just thought of that we should read. I haven't even thought of that book. And he was just shocked, that we had the same. And I'm like, okay. And I made a mental note of that because of this. That's the kind of thing that we're talking about here is that,
So it seems to me like that's more coincidental.
Well, it would be if we'd have talked to 3 or 4 different books, Marla, or if it's something in line with things he normally reads.
I'm like you intuitively knew each.
Yeah, it was just, it just popped, and then he had this exact same. We've never talked about Russell Brand. We've never mentioned Russell Brand. He's not part of our conversation. Now, there's another sponsor we talk about him, so it would be kind of like, yeah, that would make sense. With him, that makes zero sense. It would be more like for him would be reading one of the books by what's the guy breathing underwater?
Richard Rohr.
Not that breathing underwater, but the guy in New Mexico, the monk in New Mexico that does a lot of recovery stuff. That's not in
Richard
recovery.
Rohr. Richard Rohr, breathing underwater.
Richard Rohr. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't understand your. I thought you. Yeah, Richard Rohr. You're right, Craig. I couldn't understand you.
It's the Alabama accent. Go ahead.
That accent of Craig's is so strong.
Now listen to this. I got another story for you. This is
Before you go to the next story, just something I'm trying to get my head around. This thing where you just saying Zach wasn't very proactive in contacting you. Isn't it your job to contact your sponsees? I thought you had to run around after them.
No, I don't do that. Not me.
And here's another one. Don't think I'm sitting down reading that Russell Brand with you. Just please. I'm putting it out there now. It's not happening.
I listened to the book.
I listened to it, and it was very good, actually. I was very surprised.
It is.
His level of recovery really did amaze me. I had no idea that it would be half as good as it was, just quite honestly. I liked it.
Yeah, he still is talking a lot, by the way.
Oh, he's just jabber, jabber, jabber.
Just talks about a lot of shit.
This is from Hawkins' book on letting go. He says that it's talking about desire. When utilizing this way of achieving goals, we include all the details about the goal. Talking about desire, as impossible as they may seem to be to the rational mind. So the idea of an apartment was detailed. He needed an apartment for work in town, reasonably priced on Fifth Avenue on the 70s block, right next to an entrance to Central Park, at least 8 or 9 floors up and in the rear, so that the street noise would be minimized and not any bigger than about 2.5 rooms. I'm like, this is, that don't make sense to me. But he said he's wanting in this apartment for work because his practice, he has to come in and rent hotel rooms. He says it just doesn't make sense. So the next day at work, it was as busy as usual with a big caseload, meetings, patient visits. In between the meetings and patients, the feeling of wanting this for the apartment would be acknowledged and let go. And as the day progressed, the apartment was actually forgotten. So he forgot that he even wanted it. Kind of like what Amy was talking about when you wanted this for your daughter, but it was okay if they did it. It was okay if they did. That kind of an attitude. At 4:30 p.m., after the last patient, there was suddenly the impulse to drive into the city. An intuitive thought, right? Despite the fact that it was ostensibly rush hour, the road was clear and the drive took only half an hour. The car cruised to about 73rd and Lexington, pulled into the nearest real estate office. Rather magically, there happened to be a parking space open right in front of the real estate office. The real estate officer, upon hearing the tongue-in-cheek announcement that an apartment on Fifth Avenue was desired, looked with surprise and said, "Well, you're certainly in luck. Exactly 1 hour ago, we listed the only apartment for rent on all of Fifth Avenue. At 76th Street on the 9th floor, it's a rear apartment, 2.5 rooms, and the rent's reasonable, rent controlled at $500 a month. It has just been painted and you can move in any time." So we walked over and viewed the apartment. It fit the description of the goal exactly. The lease was signed on the spot. Thus, within 24 hours of trying the letting go technique on a specific personal goal, the goal was a reality. It had been something that was almost impossible to find, and yet it happened exactly as pictured, effortlessly, and with no negative emotions. It was an easy and joyous experience. This is when he was learning to let go. So, but this is seems to be the same process with this intuitive knowing, with getting out of the way. I don't know. I think it's all the same. Anything else before we start reading?
I just find that story so hard to believe. I'm sorry.
It's
so hard to believe.
I can't believe this guy, though. Marty goes over and over more things over and over. How this has happened for him.
It just, I've done that before with a house that I really wanted, and I manifested it, and then I let it go. I'm not living in it.
Well, this is the thing. I think that if part of the preface of that is not just because you want it means it's something that will happen. If it's coming from a place of ego, of course it's not. But if it's something that is really something you really need, something that is coming from if the desire is from the small self rather than the selfish, egotistical self, then I could see those things starting to happen for you, but just because I want a new car doesn't mean that I can manifest a new car in my life. No. I think we have intuitive desires too, and intuitive stuff as well. Anyway, I'd definitely recommend the book. There's something always self-defeating in attempts to succeed. Nothing fails like success. For this reason, the Taoist always has an attitude of caution. Cautious is one who crosses a river in the spring, either because of the spring floods or because the ice is still there. And you're not quite sure how strong it is, and it's beginning to thaw. That's from the 15th chapter of the Tao Te Ching. So what the Taoist is trying to develop is a sensitivity to the situation. He tries to intuitively feel what kind of actions required under these circumstances because he feels that he can never discover it analytically with his conscious attention alone. To talk in modern Western terms about how this is done, we must realize, of course, that we're equipped inside our heads with an absolutely fantastic thing called the brain with its millions and millions of neurons. It is, as it were, the most amazing computer ever devised. Basic to the Taoist attitude to life is that you have it within you, and you may, if you don't know anything about brains very much, call it intuition or something similar. But you have within you the most amazing logical analyzer that exists in the world, and the point is to get it to work for you. So he's saying that intuitive comes from our brain. Now here's another Craig from the 42nd verse, because when we lose, we've won, and when we succeed, we have failed. Comment, Craig?
That's from the Ron Hogan translation. We were talking about that today. It just cropped up when Alan Watts was talking about, when we succeeded, we really failed, or the other way around. I think it just depends really on what we're measuring a success against and what we've lost to gain that success. I think just when you put it in the balance of.
This is from Returning to Silence, Katagiri. Let us imagine you're climbing up a mountain cliff. That situation is just like being on the verge of life and death. There's no way to escape. You cannot complain. If you're there, all you have to do is just be there. If you act instinctively, you could die. If you're nervous, you could die. Should you depend on the intellect, you could also die. So you have to depend on the mountain, your mind, and all circumstances. You have to watch carefully and understand. Your conscience is supposed to be clear and know what is going on there. Then, after using your best understanding, your body and your mind should depend on one step. This is action. There's nothing to think about, nothing to depend on. All we have to do is just be there using all the things we already have. Consciousness, mind, mountain, weather. Then we have to act. Just take one step. Have y'all ever been in a situation that was like a really hard thing, but yet all of that left and you just knew the next thing to do and you just did it calmly? There's an element of surrender to that, surrender to the moment. That's part of this too, I think.
Traffic many times when I was younger in Copenhagen, where there was a lot of traffic, and I remember I accidentally went and against traffic on one of those one-way street, and I had to back out a little, and I wasn't nervous. It just came, oh, yeah, I went wrong, and then I just turned around. Where normally I would get nervous in a situation like that. So yes, many.
Other comments before I read on? Instead of trying with conscious attention alone, which can only think of about 3 things at a time without using a pencil as to say 3 variables in the mind at once, we can do 4 if you're a trained musician, where you're keeping 4 variables in the mind at once. An organist can go from 4 to 6 because they have 2 feet that are playing 2, but that requires a high amount of training to be able to with conscious attention to keep this many variables in mind. The world around us has infinitely more variables going on than you can reason with your conscious thinking. Let's say you want to make a contract in business, you figure out how to make it. He talks about that, but there's always something to forget, right? So you can't think of everything, in other words. So then the question arises, is it within the power of the human brain to comprehend, because of its immense complexity, in a kind of subconscious way, what the surface consciousness can never grasp? The Taoists would say certainly it can. But you've got to learn to use your brain by allowing it to go to work on your problems without interfering. Then it will deliver you a decision. So he says that's all coming from, he calls it the brain. This is why when you get to the real study of Zen Buddhist practice, you'll get to the point where you learn to act without making decisions. Or rather, to use a more exact word, without choosing. Krishnamurti talks a great deal about being choicelessly aware. And he says freedom is precisely the state of not having to choose. Now, that sounds paradoxical because we always talk about the freedom of choice. Choice is not a form of freedom in the sense of the word. Choice is the act of hesitation that we make before making a decision. It's a mental wobbling when you take a pen to write. You don't just write. You take the pen and jiggle it around and decide to start writing. Or a person comes into the room and wonders who to talk to. At that moment, he is choosing. Whereas a person who comes into a room and decides who to approach, he doesn't wait to choose. We say he is decisive, but that's a funny saying because it means he doesn't stop to decide.
That's very good. Oh,
yeah, go ahead, Dennis.
Well, I was just thinking because that's kind of how, and I know it's going to talk about later on, so I don't want to blow up on that, but we were kind of raised to sit and make those choices and freedom of choice, right? And I kind of like that freedom is not to choose, but act on that intuition instead.
It's the freedom of not having to choose.
Yes, exactly. Because, and I know when I'm in that indecisiveness mood where I have to figure out one thing and I got to research and all, I don't like that. I don't like that at all. I like when things just happens naturally. So that was really an eye opener for me. That I don't have to decide at all. I'll just go with that. And it's kind of funny that we are saying that it's a thought. Of course, it has to be a thought before we do something, but we also refer to that intuition as a gut feeling, right?
Yeah, you know that, and this is the thing, Dennis. We put all these tags on God and God stuff, and you know, at one point I would have probably. I mean, I have Buddhist friends that would get offended because you mentioned God, right? And I have Christian friends who would get offended if you did not think it was God doing this, okay? So I think the whole point is no matter what tags we decide to put on this stuff, where we're coming from with this, I just know it's something more than my intellect. I don't give a flying flip where it's coming from. Okay,
that's good.
It's just good, you know.
I agree. Yes, I agree.
If you want to think it's God, if Mark wants to think it's higher mind consciousness or some other name, I don't care. You know, doesn't matter to me. I think when we get past those labels, that gives us the freedom to really start seeing more in this than we could have seen before.
I'd just like to say something. I use the word God, but I don't mean God in the conventional sense. I guess I'm talking about the Tao and the 12 steps when I say God. But the thing about choice, I'm trying to word this in a way that doesn't sound like a Rush song, but if you choose not to decide, it's going to sound exactly like a Rush song, you're still making a choice. You're choosing not to make the choice. So that is itself a choice. You're choosing to let it be what it is.
But Matt, I think what he's saying is it's already knowing what to do without having to sit and mentally figure it out. It's above making the choice. You don't have to make the choice because you know what to do. He doesn't quite talk it in those words, but that's what and if you listen to, you can go to YouTube and look up Krishnamurti. There's a lot of his teaching still on YouTube when he's a very old man.
And can you probably spell that in the chat so that I can make a note of it?
Yeah, I will. It's and I'll just say it for anyone that's on the podcast. It's KRISHNAMURTI. I'll put it in the chat for you, though.
Thank you.
He has a number of talks in YouTube. Being choicelessly aware. See, Matt, he's talking about being aware above choice, that you don't have to mentally do this. You're aware. And I think that's what this is. All these things are happening around us. We're just not conscious to it. It goes back, Amy, to the 11th step, praying only for the knowledge of his will. It's not that we're praying his will to be done. We're just praying to be able to see it.
And the power to carry that out.
Yeah.
That's the thing, too.
That's the freedom.
Yeah.
That's the freedom.
And this is so screaming out to me, page 420 in the book, where it says, acceptance is the key to my relationship with God today. I never just sit and do nothing while waiting for him to tell me what to do. Rather, I do whatever is in front of me to be done, and I leave the results up to him. However it turns out, that's God's will for me, or the universe's will for me, or the Tao's will for me, or whatever you want to put into that sentence, right? And then I love this sentence in what we're reading. You've got to learn to use your brain by allowing it to go to work on your problems without interfering. Then it will deliver you a decision. So that's like trusting that I'm smart enough and good enough that it's going to happen the way it's supposed to happen, as long as I stay out of the freaking way.
And the way I stay out of the way is doing what you said. I just help the person that's in front of me to help.
And that is the basis of the Tao.
Yeah.
Wow. This is very good. Also in step 11, when you're talking about a page, I think it's 86, 85, 86, we will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us.
85.
It's kind of an extension of that. We'll intuitively know how to handle everything. Right? Not just the things that's baffling us, but everything.
But didn't everything used to baffle? Everything used to baffle everything.
That's so true.
It sounds almost as if the choice has already been made for us, and it's just up to us to accept it.
That sounds like fated. You're fated for something. Is that what you mean? Like your fate is set? Your destiny is set?
Yeah, almost. Yeah, almost. Yeah, kind of like that. The decision's already made. It's just up to me to do it. What do you think about it, Craig? Well, I don't think about it because the decision's already made. It's kind of like being married. It's kind of like being a married man. The decision's already made for you. It's just up to me to do it.
That's true. I get that.
Well, I think it can be fate, like summer is going to follow spring, like spring followed winter, like the earth is rotating around the sun, and a year from now we'll be in this very same location. There's a cycle to all of these things. So if the rest of the universe has a cycle, the rest of our world, why do we not think we have a cycle too? And I think it's this flow of life. Think about it like the water still. This flow of life, we're going down the stream. We're fated to go down the stream, Marla. Yes, I believe that. We're fated this path. Now, we're going to keep traveling down the stream. Now, I think there's things in there that can be different one way or the other, but yet we're going to go, unless we're fighting this thing, we're going to go with this flow of life. That's what makes this easy when we learn to live in this flow. Keep our feet up, not grab things on the branch. You know what I'm saying? That whole idea, not fight it, just go with the flow. Stand on what is moving, Dennis, like we talked about before. You just go where you're being pushed. Claire B talks about, that's her little saying, go where you're being pushed.
That's almost like a hydrological cycle.
Yeah. Thank you, Craig. Hey, Mark.
Mark's
laughing. Mark's busy laughing.
I'd love to be in on the joke, Craig.
It's literally just the water cycle.
He's talking about the water cycle.
But he wanted to make it something way more complicated. And he's like, isn't it like the I can't even say that word. But anyway, we're like, no, it's just the water cycle. And Buddy's like, but no, it's something more complicated. Hydrological cycle.
Craig's not going to let us forget that. Mark, what's your thoughts on this? Because I know you come from a background that's not a God background. I really am interested in how this sounds to you. Is this too woo woo for you?
No, it's not. But I've been over here fighting my mind the whole time, thinking that the more this sounds like this other thing, the less it actually ends up sounding like this thing. So I'm just going to intuitively go with my gut instinct on what this is actually like landing for me, right? So this whole the self-defeating attempts to succeed and nothing fails like success really smacks of the whole like drug and alcohol use, in that the desire for more positive experiences is actually a negative experience, right? And the acceptance of a negative experience is a positive experience. And so you end up with that whole that paradox that we were talking about earlier, and the whole idea of acceptance being the key for me now, right? So the idea that, like, the more you want to be rich, the more you pursue money and power, the fact that it's not there and you're pursuing it, you'll always end up feeling poor, right? So again, I'm kind of fighting myself, because I'm like, well, no, we're really talking about intuitive thoughts, but at the same time, maybe the opposite of nothing fails like success is true, in that nothing succeeds like failure. Yeah, in that we go to the gym to feel pain, and then later on we are healthy as a result. I don't know if I'm completely off base here, but that's how it's hitting for me.
What you're really getting at is no pain, no gain.
Pain is the touchstone of all growth. One of my favorite sayings is, embrace the suck, trust the struggle.
I actually like that struggle that Mark was talking about here. That was it. I drank because I wanted to feel good all the time, right? And even in recovery, I'm that feel-good whore. But when you're chasing something, it actually becomes horrible, because you always want something that you don't have right now. And that's interesting that's how that success can turn negative. That was a good insight. I like that.
We were talking about that with money too. The same thing can happen with money. Because the more you have, the more you want, the more you become obsessed with it, the more you need it, and it's just a crazy cycle of craziness.
It's funny, I never had it with money, but my wife does. She never nags about me being messy and all that here, but with money she does. She says, and it's kind of funny, so I kind of get trapped under that one there.
Zen Buddhism, which is simply a Buddhist extension of Taoism, arose out of the marriage of Buddhism and Taoism in the 5th century AD and over the following centuries. They have a way of training you so that you always act without choosing. For example, one day there was a leaky roof. A couple of monks were attending to the Zen master, and he said, the roof is leaking. One monk disappeared and came back instantly with a sieve. He put it under the drips. Another monk, after some time, came back with a bucket. The master praised the one who brought the sieve. Now, The action wasn't exactly appropriate to catch rain, but the point was that he was in the spirit of the Zen discipline by acting without choosing.
I have a quick question here, Mark, because this one drove me insane. Can somebody please tell me what a sieve is? Because it kind of makes point.
It's a strainer.
Oh, a strainer. Got it.
The water goes right through it. But it baffled me on it for another reason that I just don't understand. Why is it intuitive to pick up a sieve and not a bucket? I don't get that one.
That's a good question. I think it's more because he just acted on his intuition. His intuition might have been wrong, but he still acted upon that.
Okay,
that's why. And then everything can kind of become. And then by then, I don't know.
Well, even if it was wrong, he knew to put something underneath the grips. It was the wrong thing to put under there, but all right. Thanks for clarifying.
Sorry.
That's with certain people. Certain people never hesitate. They always seem to know what needs to be done. They seem somehow to grab something and do it. This is a kind of Zen capacity. So what happens is this. The teacher constantly throws curves at students and puts them in situations where they have to act immediately. One of the things, of course, that you must not do is rush, because rush is a form of hesitation. Like a person rushing to get a train, he starts to fall all over his feet, and that really holds him up. It's like trying to drive at high speed through the water with a blunt nose boat. That's a rush. But now what he's trying to obtain is a smooth, unhesitating, flowing action, which is the response to the challenge, and it must be done in what is another use of the word munon. This word is a combination of now and mind-heart, and so has the meaning of a thought, but especially for us, it is well translated by the psychological term blocking. You're blocking access to someone when they hesitate, when they stop to choose. This is the attitude of the unblocked mind.
Sometimes we have to bypass our intellectual knowledge, and that's what we're trying to intellect something that is hard to do. Mm-hmm. So
then do you not process your feelings? I just had this question is, by doing this Tao work, by stepping back and taking the broader view of things, then when we have the little shit work to do internally, I tend to just blow it off look at the bigger picture and never process. So do we not process our feelings and live the Tao? Is that what it's telling me to do too?
I think it's more observing the feelings than processing them, because if I process them, I might get into a pit of identifying myself with them. But if I can sit back and observe it, now I feel angry. This is that's just the feeling that's going through.
Not the why I feel angry, but I feel angry, but not why.
Yes. If I go in and ask why, then I want to figure it out, and then I give it back to my brain and try to intellect it and heal myself mentally. But that doesn't make any sense when it comes to feelings for me. Anyway, buddy, I'm happy to see that you look pretty good after you got stricken by lightning.
Glad to see you're alive.
Was that an intuitive thought to allow Craig to be co-host just in case? I don't know.
Just with the sieve, because I feel like Matt's really hung up on that, and this just came to me, right? I've heard it's better to try and fail than never to try at all, and I put it in the chat. So maybe the point of the Zen master being pleased with his bringing back the sieve was that he just tried something to fix the problem, and it might have not been exactly the right fix, but he tried, right? He intuitively tried to help.
So the second month though, just took him a bit longer.
Right. He sat there and analyzed and
he doesn't say that he analyzed. I just assumed the bucket was kind of far away.
I say analyzed because
if he sat and thought about what to use, then yes, I get it. I just had it in my mind. It was further to go to get the bucket than it was to pick up the sieve. But yeah, I think you're right. He thought about what to get. Yes, that makes sense.
Because the Zen master tries to teach you to act without choosing. He's trying to move you toward acting without choosing. like you just act, and I think that has to come from a different place.
Right, and I think moreover, the fact of bringing the sieve being an instant response is to get you to jump into the stream of life. The more that you do that, I think as we go on further in the reading, is your capacity for response increases. So perhaps the next time that you jump in, like your intuitive response won't be to grab a sieve, it'll be to grab a bowl, which maybe not be as good as a bucket, but ostensibly better than, a sieve. So
and here's that full circle again, because that takes me right back to the beginning of the conversation when I was talking about my uncomfortability with meditation, and you all said, do it more, practice it more. The more you do it, the more natural it will feel. Well, the more times that you practice, right, just doing the intuitive thing without thinking of it, then the more natural it will be, and the right answers will come if your own house is in order.
How much is that like just doing the next right thing, doing what's in front of you to do? Yeah, exercising a muscle. Thank you, Mark.
It's just what Mark was just talking about there. Just the next time you're going to get the right thing. I was in the garden last week, and Callum thought he'd come out and help me. So I was digging over one of the flower beds, and he says, "Can I help you?" I says, "Right, I need you to go and get me the fork." And then it disappeared. The forks I kept in the greenhouse. So I thought to myself, it'll take 2 seconds to go and grab it. It's like 5 minutes later, he came back down with this fork from the kitchen, like an eating utensil. And I'm like, "What's that for?" He says, "You told me to get the fork." I was like, So I did. Right. So maybe next time I'll maybe be a bit more explicit as to what I'm actually really needing. So I think next time you grab the garden fork rather than the eating fork. So I think that's maybe where this Zen monk was coming from. You told me to grab something. You didn't tell me what to grab. I just grabbed the first thing that came to hand. And I've seen you strain water with it. So maybe that's.
And I think we always. I don't know if we're ever going to recognize when we act intuitively in the moment. I think we're going to see it like the 9th step promises, that we realize after the fact. Like we suddenly realize God's doing for us is because it's already happened. Whoa, wait a minute. How did that happen?
Now, how do we tie this into where he in the beginning was describing that we could multitask, and most people can do 3 things at once. Some musicians can do 4 things at once. All this on intuitively knowing, is that when you kind of narrow down and only think of one thing, where you kind of everything else is
Are
that
you sure that's what he said, Dennis?
Huh?
Are you sure that's what he said? He was
Didn't he? Well, let me see.
About thinking of 3 things at a time, like there's 3 choices, not multitasking. Like when you're coming into a situation, you have multiple variables.
Yes, you're right. So it's not multitasking, but you have multiple variables that you can choose from. Okay. Yeah, I misunderstood that.
How can we, within our intellect, analyze all the variables there are to analyze? We can't. So there's got to be an intuitive way of some way that our consciousness is able to do this outside of our mental constructs, our mental thinking.
Right.
That's what I saw. Is that
also, as a mother, mothers have intuition that's beyond like anything you guys would ever know. Pretty strong. We have strong intuition. I would pick, if my daughter were pinned under a car, I would pick up the fucking car intuitively. I don't know where the strength would come from, but mothers have some strong ass shit going.
But isn't that the point, Marla? You don't know where the strength would come from. It would just come, just like we don't know how all of a sudden we intuitively do the next right thing or the right thing, but we just do.
Or the thing shows up for us, the person to help, or the thing. We don't have to even create that. It's like May 9th in Daily Reflections. The person said they're going to overcome their fear. They ask God to help them. God doesn't help them. What God does is give them someone huddled in the elevator they go up to help and they forget about their own fear. They didn't have to create that, stand from the elevator for 4 days and wait on someone to come in that looked scared. They just showed up at the elevator and said, God, I believe you're going to help me go up this elevator. God didn't help them go up the elevator. What God did was put a person in front of them they could help. That's the May 9th daily reflection. It's incredible. It gives me chills every time I read it, because that's really the way it works, is that God doesn't help us. God puts someone in our path to help, or the universe or whatever. I want to give the disclaimer. Don't want anybody getting upset with me, but
no, but I'm totally getting that God, there's things that happen that you don't know why,
You just have no idea, So,
yeah.
So our part's to let go. I think I really do. Our part is just like you were talking about, Amy, in meditation. Meditation for me is just sitting.
No expectations.
None.
Just sitting. Stillness.
No goal.
No goal.
Nothing to hear, nothing to see, because there's sound and light meditation that, you say, oh, am I going to hear today? Or am I going to see the things today I see? And, oh, I wanted this and I want that. When you start getting those kind of things happening in meditation, you can get caught up in that. And I found myself going to meditation expecting things. I said, no, I'm coming here for the wrong reasons. And
it works long term. Meditation doesn't work right away. It works long term. It's a practice, definitely.
And you see it after the fact, Maura. You'll go through a situation. Oh, I handled that differently. Why did I do that different than I used to? And then you realize, for me, it was meditation.
Well, you can't be part of a Zen group and not promote tons of meditation.
Well, you realize that's the solution, is emptiness. It's all about emptiness. Every bit of it, for me. Even my sobriety is about emptiness. That's exactly what it's about. Oh, it's 5:03. Craig, you want to close us down? Thank you for jumping in when my internet went out. Thank you, sir.
So you're welcome.
Next week is Sensei.
Yep. We'll pick up the week after Sensei's been. We'll finish off this one in a couple of weeks. But so next week's verse 8 for Sensei. So any questions, send it to the Facebook page or send it to the messenger chat and we'll pick it up. We'll send it over. And that's
9 p.m. then, aren't we, Craig?
We'll be back. We'll be at 9 p.m. because the really annoying thing, Matt, is the American side of the world, they just want to be the first to everything. So they had to put the clocks forward 3 weeks before everybody else did. So it's kind of like two fingers to the rest of the world. So they just do not. They don't know when to. Yeah,
they might put their clocks forward, but they're still behind us. But we better watch our language, or some Australians may come in here and point out we're behind them.
Oh my God.
But the Americans just like to muddy the water. They can't just let them.
No. We hate daylight savings time. Just let time stay the same all year.
Right. So anyway, we'll see you next week at 9:00 GMT, Matt. Everybody else, have an amazing week, and we'll see you next week for Sensei.
Hello, this is Buddy C. I wanted to make you aware of several recovery-related resources that I've posted in the episode description. These resources include a list of recovery podcasts, a free sober meditation app, daily recovery email, shared Google recovery calendars. Hope you put some of these resources to use and have a great week.
Thank you for listening to the Tao of Our Understanding Recovery Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends in recovery.